Why are we talking about zombies? Good Lord. Isn't that just something you throw into a horde mode in a video game to make a few extra bucks? Zombies are my generation's mythology. I'm a 40-something dude. I grew up being freaked out by Night of the Living Dead. This right here. It was made in 1968. I mean, I didn't see it till long after it came out. Although Romero basically codified what we think of as zombies these days, he kind of invented the modern zombie. The idea does date back to Haitian mythology. Previously, a zombie was just a mindless thrall to a shaman or a voodoo priest. Romero's the one who gave them the form that we know of today. And Romero invented, gave voice to, expressed what became zombie mythology. Now, before zombies, horror consisted of familiar things like ghosts and vampires and dragons and more fantasy. We know all that stuff. A few things that were invented in the 20th century as expressions of modern anxiety include things like zombies. Before zombies, there was Godzilla as a Japanese perspective on the atomic bomb. Aliens, by the way, which are about a century old. Now that we have explored every corner of the Earth, and we've cataloged all the creatures we found there, there's no longer anxiety about terra incognito. And really, that anxiety was about the dragons out there that scared us. So we transferred that out into space, and now we have aliens. That's also a kind of a unique modern mythology. But zombies, they are the latest to come along. I will argue in a little bit, they might also be the last mythology. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. Zombies arose from secular anxiety, unlike a lot of other modern monsters, Godzilla, aliens, zombies. They're not necessarily supernatural, but they are, because supernatural things, we have science. It dispelled that. We know there's no fairies. We know there's no ghosts. So instead, our monsters are secular, and zombies are one of those. They arise from anxiety about death, infectious disease, collectivism, paranoia, loss of identity. And the four important developments that after Romero made this little movie in '68, which was a cult movie, by the way, excuse me. This was no great commercial success. In fact, Romero really screwed up some important things. I'll talk about that in a second as well. But he made Night of the Living Dead. He followed it up with some sequels. But there were four things that Romero could not have anticipated that really propelled zombie mythology into what it is today. The first thing is the development of a paranoia about infectious disease. I think AIDS was the first step. Ebola is also a terrifying, virulent infectious disease. There's the threat of widespread pandemics is part of the zeitgeist. This here's a map from 2008, the percentage of adults that are infected with HIV. And it's terrifying. It's a global thing right there. Disease, widespread pandemics, diseases are invisible, ruthless killers that reduce us to the vulnerabilities of flesh, to faulty biology. And it can strike anyone. Now, cancer's always been here. We've always been aware of cancer, but cancer has been almost exclusively the domain of the old. Children with cancer are a terrible thing because, partly, it's so rare. But we've sort of accepted cancer as something that hits the old. And in the last 20 or 30 years, there's even been before the last 20 or 30 years, there's been a kind of a stigma associated with discussing it. So zombies kind of give expression to that. But for the most part, we're used to old people dying. It's not unusual. It doesn't scare us the same way that pandemics, that diseases do. Old people dying is a biological imperative. We've had millions of years to get accustomed to it. What we're not used to is wholesale premature death. And that's what zombies get into. That's what the fear of pandemics taps into. It's the opposite of the biological imperative of death. It's an outrage. So as AIDS and Ebola, as these things scared us and freaked us out, I think zombie mythology tapped into that fear. Now, what else happened that we've got zombies being a big deal these days? Kids who were freaked out, like me, who were freaked out by Night of the Living Dead, they grew up. They were influenced by horror, and now they're creating entertainment. They're controlling the money that determines what entertainment gets made. Classic example of this is comic books. Part of the reason that I think comic books are a big deal is that the kids who grew up reading comic books aren't just little nerdy kids anymore. They run studios. Furthermore, they're also consuming entertainment. They've grown up and they remember this from their childhood. I think that's part of the popularity of zombies, is kids like me who saw Night of the Living Dead, who saw Dawn of the Dead, that stuff stayed with us. And now that we've grown up and we're consuming entertainment, we're talking about entertainment, and some people are creating this entertainment, zombies sort of burble up into that. And they're very successful for that reason. You know, if you want to get rich, figure out what the zeitgeist is of kids today. What's freaking out kids today? And then wait 20 years until they've grown up and they have the financial wherewithal to buy into all of that and to convert their children into it and then market it to them. That's partly what's happened with zombies. So infectious disease tapped into our, we're afraid of infectious disease. Kids who were freaked out by zombie movies grew up. And then in, I meant to look this up, 2000, whenever, Danny Boyle made a movie called 28 Days Later, which really updated the mythology from slow, shambling, outrageously flesh-eating hordes. It's a little ridiculous when you kind of think about it. And he directly gave rise to this idea that zombies they equal infectious disease. This idea of a rage virus. Let's not worry about zombies being the dead risen from the grave, because that really is a supernatural thing. Even though Night of the Living Dead suggested that I think it was like a probe from Venus crashed back into Earth and it brought space disease with it. Like, it has to give it this secular, this scientific possible explanation. But really, when you think about it, the dead rising from the grave, that's pretty supernatural, right? But Danny Boyle's like, we don't have to do any of that. And actually, to be fair, this was, I believe, an Alex Garland script. Danny Boyle and Alex Garland collaborated to create a more modern expression of zombies that directly tapped into the virulence of infectious disease. This whole thing about, hey, zombies are fast now. Speed of a zombie doesn't matter. It doesn't make it a zombie or not a zombie. But Alex Garland created scarier, fast zombies that are more immediately frightening. He kind of updated it. And furthermore, the rage virus, as we see in the movie, it's worth noting, by the way, the rage virus comes from monkeys. You know what else came from monkeys? The AIDS virus. There's no real, I'm not necessarily correlating those, but I was just thinking of that today. Like, hey, didn't it? Yeah, it came from some monkeys. Monkeys are terrible, and that's just one of the many reasons that monkeys are terrible. They've given us AIDS and the rage virus. Jerks. But the rage virus, this idea plays on our fear, not just of infectious disease, but of riots. It frees zombies of the sluggishness of being a direct death metaphor. If you look at the opening of Dead Rising, where Frank West is coming in on a helicopter and looking down into the city of Willamette, where this zombie outbreak is happening, the images directly mirror the footage of the riots in L.A. after the Rodney King verdict, and specifically the beating of Reginald Denny. I think zombie mythology, in addition to being about virulent disease, and specifically from 28 Days Later, taps into our fear of of riots breaking out. How scary is that? And then finally, the final step here. Walking Dead came along. Speaking of comic books, by the way. And I don't mean the comic books, I mean the TV show. Walking Dead is entertainment engineered to appeal to a wide demographic. It is a soap opera, really, when you think about it. And I have no shame in admitting that I enjoy a soap opera. Who doesn't? Not all soap operas are for housefraus sitting around while their husbands are at work doing the dishes and vacuuming, or whatever the old stereotype was for General Hospital or As the World Turns, all of that stuff. Are those things even still around? I bet they are. But Walking Dead is a modern soap opera approach with the zombie outbreak, zombie apocalypse as the backdrop. Like a soap opera, these are characters in dramatically exaggerated situations, and some of them live and some of them die, and It's the equivalent of somebody having an evil twin who emerges. There's shocking twists, right? It's an episodic TV show carefully calculated to appeal to different demographics, and it does very well at that. You've got your dashing white guy, your younger, beautiful women. You've got your minorities represented. And this creates this idea that humanity is at stake. Here's a carefully cultivated cross-section of humanity. There's children, there's adults, there's grandpas like Dale and Herschel. There's something for everyone in Walking Dead. And I think this is the fourth major beat in zombie mythology really coming of age, and in fact kind of being mainstreamed. I'll talk about that in a little bit, but kind of being deprived of some of its bite. So how does this express itself in games? What are the best zombie games? To me, the best zombie games aren't good games with zombies. That doesn't count. If the game doesn't capture something unique about zombie mythology, that's fine, it could be a good game, but what I want to look at with these top 5 are games that somehow express something distinct about zombie mythology. The first one, the number 5 zombie game of all time, is Dying Light. And what Dying Light does is it captures the idea of zombies as meat. They are inhuman. They're pure flesh. They're flesh without souls or identities, the things that make us who we are. You know, it's the dead, where souls have moved on, they have risen, and now they're just out to eat and consume. By the way, Rebellion is a developer. They did these sniper games, and they have a trilogy of zombie games. It's the sniper formula applied to zombie games, where, I should point out, as you can see from the screenshot, a lot of what you get in Dying Light is just the gore effect that you see in zombie movies of zombies being blown apart and beaten and hacked and bleeding, and all that terrible stuff is a fixture of Dying Light. Rebellion Zombie Trilogy, which is based on these sniper games, does this really weird thing where when you shoot somebody with a gun in the sniper games, it shows this kind of clinical X-ray version of what the bullet is doing to the person. Like, it shows what bones are being broken and where it penetrates the flesh. It might even show organs. Does it show organs? But their zombie trilogy does the same thing, which I always thought was a little odd. Like, the zombie doesn't care if it has a broken leg. Why should I? It's the point of a zombie. Is you have to shoot it in the head. So Dying Light is the 5th best zombie game for capturing this idea of zombies as meat. Another fundamental truth of zombies, which is expressed so well in the Dead Rising series, and the best of those games is Dead Rising 2 Off the Record. This is a screenshot from straight up Dead Rising. But Dead Rising really captures this fundamental truth of zombie mythology, that zombies are innumerable. There are an endless supply of them. That's always, up until Dead Rising, that's been something that zombie games have struggled with. They can only throw a couple of you at a time. But Dead Rising tapped into, it expressed with the power of the Xbox 360 when it first came out, and now it does it just fine with PCs, what it's like to have all these zombies on the screen. And that's not a cut shot. I still love that. I still love looking at that. All those zombies out there, that's Chuck Green carrying his daughter Katie, and you've got to wade through that. In this little bit right here, you can't fight them. You've just got to wind your way. You've got to make it through the crowd. There's this amazing crowd technology that works there. So Dead Rising 2 captures the idea that zombies are innumerable. Fundamental facet of zombie mythology. Space Pirates and Zombies is a 2D spaceship game. You might think, well, that's kind of odd. But what Space Pirates and Zombies does that almost no other zombie game can manage is it creates the idea that zombies are infectious. It captures the fundamental truth that what's terrifying about zombies isn't necessarily just that they eat you. It's that they infect you, that people who were your loved ones have lost their identity and they've risen from the grave, and now they are converted to flesh-eating undead. It's really hard to do that in a video game. But with this idea with little zombies floating through space, and they get on your ship and they take over your crew if you're not careful, and then they turn your ship against you, and you've got to fight your own ship, which is very much like when somebody gets bitten by a zombie, you're going to have to put that person down or fight them when they become a zombie. Very few games manage that. It's a tough thing to do with gameplay dynamics. Space Pirates and Zombies manages it at that tactical level, and then also at a larger strategic level, with later beats in the game, there's another thing that Space Pirates and Zombies does so well is it expresses a zombie apocalypse, like the conversion of society from a well-oiled machine to something that has completely fallen apart and is being overrun by zombies. And so therefore, this is the third best zombie game. The second best zombie game of all time is Sarah Northway's Rebuild, which is a strategy game. Rebuild expresses beautifully the idea that zombies aren't just some localized phenomenon. They're not a ghost wandering around in a haunted house. They're not a slasher out in the woods of a summer camp. They're not a demon possessing a little girl. They are a global threat. It comes from them being innumerable and infectious. And as such, they are an existential threat to civilization. The end of the world goes hand in hand with zombies. When you say zombie apocalypse, that's redundant. You don't need to put in the apocalypse. In most zombie fiction, well, a fundamental thing that can happen with zombie fiction, a threat, is that civilization will collapse. And then Rebuild is explicitly about that collapse and about trying to cope with the loss of civilization. So that is the second best zombie game, which brings us to today's live stream of the #1 zombie game of all time. Let's go back to this fella right here. Look at that guy. Look at that square jaw and that chin and that dashing stubble. Pretty blue eyes. He's a sheriff too. Like he is the authority who will protect you. He's a lovable, friendly civil servant. He's gruff. You can't even tell from that picture, by the way, that he's English. Andrew Lincoln, the actor, very, very English. It's really funny to listen to him in interviews with this accent and think, oh my God, Rick Grimes has an accent? Ladies love that guy, right? Dudes want to be him. And is it just me, or does he look like Ken Levine? You guys know what Ken Levine looks like? The show will sometimes carefully apply gore to him. He even had a hobo beard for a little while. But, you know, he's a soulful fellow. He's a good father and a good husband. He's never wrong. And when he is wrong, he's appropriately contrite when he comes around. Furthermore, he is the anchor of Walking Dead. Because AMC is convinced, and probably rightly so, AMC being the channel that produces and airs Walking Dead, AMC is convinced that he's the main guy people show up to see. That's how he's written, that's how he's played, that's how he's taken in by viewers. He's the centerpiece of Walking Dead. But you know what? There was no Rick Grimes in a zombie apocalypse. Oh my God, there certainly are not dumpsters to hide under. This is where Walking Dead is the mainstreaming of zombie mythology. It robs it of its bite. It waters it down. It makes it a palatable soap opera that plays within the confines of very, very strict rules. We are not going to lose our main character. Ancillary characters, they'll be killed, sure. If they're not a weekly hook for the audience, they're especially up for grabs. Shane can go by the wayside. Lori can die. She was annoying to people, right? Dale, Tyrese, that blonde chick who took up with the governor, I forget her name. They can go by the wayside. This whole idea at the end of this season, there's no way this is a spoiler, this is all over, you can't miss this. There's some idea that Negan, this new bad guy, has killed someone. And I think it's handled really poorly, because I had no idea. I thought he was beating someone. I had no idea from watching the stupid show that he had killed someone, except for all the conversation afterwards was about, oh, who's going to die, who's going to die? We know who's not going to die. It's not going to be Daryl. It's not going to be Glenn. We know it's not going to be Andrew Lincoln. Whatever. I'll tune in. I'll watch it. But anyway, the point is, a central tenet of zombie mythology, because it is biological, because it is disease, no one is safe in a zombie apocalypse. A zombie story, a story about zombies, there are no heroes that save the day. This is a secular 20th century invention. It is something that is born and raised in the zeitgeist of the Cold War. The fear of communism, the failure of asymmetrical warfare in Vietnam, of the U.S. fighting an asymmetrical war, the betrayal we suffered at Watergate. That's what, these are not heroic things. These are not things that a Rambo can save us from. And now it plays on this fear of virulent infectious disease. AIDS is not just something gay people get. Ebola is not just something that happens in the middle of Africa. Well, it kind of is, but the fear is that it might break out of Africa. This is not, zombie mythology is not the stuff of legend or heroics. It is not good versus evil. Because zombies aren't evil. They're amoral. They're strictly biological. They're just appetite. There's nothing evil about that. It's not like a demon or a serial killer or a slasher. It has no regard for who is the leading man. That is not part of zombie mythology, which is why I want to introduce you to Marcus from State of Decay. To no one's surprise, State of Decay is, to my mind, the single best zombie game ever made for a few reasons. One of which being this fella right here, Marcus. When you start playing State of Decay, you're Marcus and Ed, and you guys have been out fishing, literally gone fishing. That's the name of the first journal entry, gone fishing. You've been fishing for 2 weeks. You haven't had a cell phone. You haven't had access to the internet. Of course, you're not getting newspapers delivered. And it turns out that, oh my gosh, while you were gone, there was a zombie apocalypse. And you find out because zombies start wandering into the campsite. Ed is obviously the comic relief. He's cracking jokes and sort of freaking out. He's like the Hudson here. Marcus, who is a clerk, but he's also very athletic. He is our hero. He's our leading man. He takes up with some folks in a ranger station. In the ranger station, there's another cast of characters there. There's this band of survivors. That's also a tenet of zombie mythology. And Marcus obviously is going to be their leader. But just in case, we're also introduced to Maya. Maya, right, yeah. That's Maya on the left. One of the first quests that Marcus does is they go to investigate gunfire, and they find this totally badass chick who's been out hunting, and she's shooting zombies. You show up to help her, to quote-unquote rescue her. That's what I think the quest text says. She doesn't need rescuing. She's out there headshotting these zombies when you approach. Maybe there's one or two you have to pick off, but she's taking care of herself just fine. You later find out she's in the army. She's your other badass character. So Marcus and Maya are the heroes of State of Decay. And what State of Decay does, which is really difficult to do in a video game, is it lets them die. And that for me is one of those peak video game moments. When I think back on the, 5, 10 best video game moments I ever had, regardless of the quality of the game, realizing that Marcus and Maya can die was huge. Because I thought it would be like, okay, if one of these main characters gets killed, you have to reload. And there's no reloading in State of Decay, by the way. I guess you could pop out and you could copy a file, make a backup file of your save. I first started playing on the Xbox 360, where that's really not an option. But now that it's on the PC, yeah, you could probably cheat. But State of Decay is built to let the lead characters get killed. Because what happens is, as you're playing, you take up with a community of survivors, you upgrade different survivors. Some of them get fatigued as they go on different missions. So you have to swap out and play a different survivor. And early on in State of Decay, you think that the two main survivors, the two playable characters, are simply Marcus and Maya. And you have to alternate between them. But then one of them dies, and you're like, wait, what? And then the other one can die. You could be left with random character number 200 or 7 that's been rolled up. One of them, that's Lily Ritter on the right. The fate of her father and brother are important plot points in the game. She actually can't die because she's the voice on the radio. Lily, I believe, and can she die in Breakdown? I don't think so. So Lily can't die, but she's not the hero. She's basically kind of the narrator. You can't have the narrator get killed. But what this does is State of Decay captures the idea that no one is safe. There are no heroes, no women, no children, although there aren't children in the game, unfortunately, because that also is a big part of zombie mythology. There are kid zombies in Night of the Living Dead, in 28 Days Later, in the opening of Walking Dead, by the way. I think the very first episode, certainly Sophie. Kid zombies that's part of the idea that not even children are safe. And certainly the community itself, and this is expressed in State of Decay, the community itself isn't safe. Part of the formula You see this in Night of the Living Dead, which is where we established how zombies work. Characters come together, they survive, then there's bickering that brings out human weakness, and then that brings about the fall of the barricades, and the zombies pour in, and everyone dies. Dawn of the Dead, the second Romero movie, did that with the bikers. They break into the mall, the barricades fall, everyone dies. Although it introduces this idea, and this is how State of Decay ends, by the way, spoiler, but at the end of Dawn of the Dead, two of the characters fly off on a helicopter to uncertain fates. And that's how the original State of Decay ends, is you and by the way, I lost so many characters getting to this ending, like I forget who actually survived. But what happens is you have to do a really difficult final mission to break through the walls of Trumbull Valley, I think that's what it's called, and then you escape, and there's a little coda, like, you don't know where you're going, but you made it out of the valley, and kind of a to be continued. Maybe that's what we'll see in State of Decay too. But more to the point, they then introduced a kind of an endless mode with Breakdown, which we'll look at in a second. So this idea that there are no heroes, it's shocking and it's important. It's an important part of zombie mythology because any good monster movie is about the characters instead of the monsters. The audience watches to imagine themselves. There needs to be a placeholder for the audience, like where do I fit myself? Where does my perspective go? The audience imagines themselves going up against that monster. The idea is, what would I do? Would I survive? And you have to empathize with the characters and their plight, or otherwise they're just kill fodder. And that's why slasher movies, that's why 99% of slasher movies are creatively bankrupt trash, is you're just watching people get dispatched. But when you think about The Exorcist, the main character in The Exorcist isn't Pazuzu, what's the demon's name? It's Father Merrin and Father Karras. Rosemary's Baby, the title character, it's not the baby, I guess it is. But the main character, of course, is Rosemary. Paranormal Activity. We don't know much about the demon. We know Katie and Micah. We sympathize with them. Everybody understands. They're a likable young couple. Everybody can understand that. They're in their condo. It Follows. It's about Jay, played by Micah Monroe, and her sexuality. It's not about this weird, unstoppable force. We know very little about it. The Babadook. Essie Davis, her character's a mother. It's not about the Babadook itself. It's mainly about her. In The Witch, which just came out, it's about that family and the daughter. I think her name was Thomason, I think, in a Game of Thrones. At any rate, it's about that family. Jaws is about Quint Brody and Hooper. The shark is it's just sort of a catalyst to bring them together. Alien is about Ripley, right? Alien, by the way, is a great early example of how there is no Rick Grimes in a zombie mythology. There's also no Rick Grimes in Alien in the first movie, because I don't know if you remember, but back when it first came out, it was really shocking when Dallas dies. You're watching Alien and you think, oh yeah, the captain, Tom Skerritt, he's going to be the hero. He's going to be the one who lives. He's, the second one to die? You don't do that. You don't kill the captain. There's supposed to be a hero here. Now, I mentioned before that I think zombies might be the final mythology for us. And I say that because consider Alien, by the way. Alien is arguably mythology, right? It plays on our fear of parasites, and also the whole conceit of, are aliens scary? Are they like us? What are they like? But Alien isn't quite a mythology. I would say, and this is, I think, what it's going to be like from here on out, Alien is a franchise. It's an intellectual property. Unlike mythology, it does not belong to everyone. Alien will only evolve as the license holders say it can evolve, which basically has to do with how much money it will earn. Now, true, this is what people want in a way, is what will the marketplace buy? But the control of this mythology isn't like normal mythology. It's not driven by people, by zeitgeist necessarily. It's driven by IP holders. Why that didn't happen, by the way, with zombies is a curious story. If zombies were, if Romero were making movies today, things would be very different. These would be licensed, right? There would be a trademark. They might give them a different name. One of the things that happened with Night of the Living Dead, and this is kind of sad, Romero, somebody screwed up when they were putting together and distributing into theaters Night of the Living Dead, and the proper copyrights weren't filed. Night of the Living Dead, you may not realize this, is public domain. That's why in so many movies you see footage of people watching Night of the Living Dead. When you watch a movie and a character's watching a TV show or a movie or something, they have to buy the rights to whatever is being broadcast. So a lot of times you'll see characters watching like old black and white cartoons that have since fallen into public domain. Because Romero screwed up in terms of registering Night of the Living Dead as a trademarked property, anybody can show it. I could sit here right now and be streaming the entire movie, talking over it, and there's no license holder that would shut me down. And that's part of why zombies are forever public domain, which isn't the case with Godzilla. It is not the case with Alien. So I kind of feel, and this is open to debate, but I kind of feel that this might be the last instance of mythology as opposed to intellectual property.